For a long time, I wanted to make a video about how history YouTube sucks, why it sucks, etc. But the problem with that is, the second that you make a video like that, you also need to provide examples. And when you provide examples, they're going to be YouTubers. And when you provide YouTubers as examples, you automatically ensure that a large portion of the audience is not actually going to engage with what you're saying and is rather only going to engage with whether or not they like the person that you're talking about. That is what it immediately becomes all about, nothing but that. So it's like, okay, why would I bother to make a video explaining why history YouTubers in general, like 99.9% of them are horrible, and they don't actually do anything resembling history, which I will explain what that actually means in a second, when it's not going to get through to anyone. Everyone is just going to have an adverse or a positive reaction based on their own preconceived notions around those creators, which are usually based on whether they agree politically with them and not actually anything else. So why bother? What's the point? However, I have come across a great opportunity to provide an example of that. And what is going to happen here is the people who like this guy are going to be angry at me for talking about him. The people who dislike him are going to be happy that I shit on him. And we're not going to get anywhere. Nonetheless, I want to talk about it, so I'm going to do it anyway. I don't know who this person is, aside from the fact that they have a channel that is, from what I understand, your generic sort of complaining that there are black people in video games sort of thing. You know, like someone who makes videos complaining about like there being women or black people in video games, or like the latest HBO, Netflix series, whatever the fuck, you know, shit that no one cares about. And he made a video debunking a historian, which is apparently something that he does a lot. Because I looked at his channel, he's got like 5 other videos like this. This sort of thing comes from like a disconnect where these people don't actually know what history is. They do not know what history is. For them, history is narrative. It's storytelling. It's a tool to be used, you know, for their own like 2 IQ political arguments. Whereas the people who he is addressing, who are actual like academic historians, do not like analyze history in order to be able to say this was evil, this was good, this was bad. And he just like watches this historian making statements that are just objectively true about a historical topic. And he's like, his reaction to that is like, but why didn't she say that it was evil? But why didn't she say that that was bad? Like, I wouldn't care about that. Okay, I would care about that. But at the very least, you know, if it was coming from someone who was just upfront about the fact that they have no fucking clue what they're talking about, and what they're doing is just trying to make a dumb political argument. Okay, great, whatever. But this guy tries to like present himself as some sort of like history expert, an authoritative expert. And the way that he does that is absolutely crazy. He takes a bunch of like terms from academia that he's like, I guess, heard of like in passing, and tries to apply them to himself. And half of you have already figured out who it is, obviously. However, I'm going to provide an example of that from this video just to start with, just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. Just to start out showing you the way that he presents himself.
Before I present my ideas, I do want to underline the fact that I am no expert on this field. This is a little bit outside my field of expertise. And also, unfortunately, I don't have a team member with my researchers and academics that is specialized in this area. Therefore, my words cannot be peer-reviewed for this video, which basically means do take whatever I say with a pinch of salt. I'm telling you.
Okay, so firstly, let's make something clear here. You are not an expert on any field. You do not have a field of expertise. You're a YouTuber who makes reaction videos to whatever shit shows up on your feed. I do not understand. Like, he's trying to say that he's not an expert specifically on Soviet history. So take what he's saying here with a grain of salt. No, that is not anywhere near far enough. That is simply not the case. You do not know what you're talking about at all. You are not equipped to talk about history as a field of study at all. Let's get that out of the way first. Secondly, you can tell from his conception of what peer review is that he has absolutely no fucking idea what he's talking about. What I'm saying here cannot be peer-reviewed because I cannot present it to my apparent team of academics, so I just have waiting out of frame. You have a team of academics? You make reaction videos on YouTube, dude. You have a team of academics? And that's not what peer review is. Peer review isn't like telling someone, hey, do you like my YouTube reaction video? Peer review is an actual like official process whereby articles or books that are submitted, like, you know, for like publication in academic publications are blindly reviewed by usually like a panel of 4 or 5 different people from that field without them knowing the name of the person or, you know, the identity of the person who has submitted it, to see whether they are, you know, fit for publication or whatever by that publisher or that journal etc. Peer review is not when someone who is clearly not your peer, for one, an academic is not your peer. An academic is far above you, like in another planet from what you are. So it wouldn't be peer review in the first place. It would be like granddaddy review. We don't have a word for this concept. It doesn't exist. But for two, that's just not what peer review is. It's simply not what it is. It's like you've taken a term that you've seen smart people use, and you've applied your own definition to it as someone who is clearly not very smart, and decided that my YouTube reaction videos are a thing that can be peer-reviewed. No, that's not what that term means, dude. What the hell are you talking about? So it's someone who like has sort of decided that they are like an expert on history in general, even with that disclaimer that he doesn't really know much about Soviet history, though he does sort of pretend that he is like knowledgeable on history in general, like he has a field of expertise. That is just an embarrassing statement. You do not have a field of expertise. So that's one thing, just to show you, he's sort of presenting himself to his audience as an authority on history, someone who is fit to be making judgments of historians, you know, these weaselly lying historians who just tell you lies all the time to influence you with the communist agenda that puts black people in your video games and women in your Lord of the Rings Netflix cash grab. Is that a thing that exists? I hope so. So, that's the sort of vibe that we're going to be going into here. And once you've seen one or two of his arguments in this video, you've seen them all. It's all the same. I will spoil it for you. The historian answers a question with the sort of answer that any historian worth their salt would give. You know, someone asks a question and their answer is, well, you know, here's what happened, here's how it happened, here's how the people who did it conceived of themselves and thought about what they were doing, here's how people who were opposed to them conceived of themselves and thought about what they were doing. Basically, the sort of practice that any decent historian should engage in. This guy's reaction every single time that happens is, but the Soviet Union was evil. Why aren't you saying they're evil? Why aren't you saying they're bad? Why aren't you using the negative adjectives that I need you to use? That is his reaction every single time. And when I saw this, it was like, okay, it's a dumb guy. It's a dumb guy YouTuber just reacting in an emotional manner. There's a million of these, okay? I even make my own dumb guy react videos occasionally. But when I do it, I don't like present I don't make those responding to historians who are saying things that are just factually correct. Like, I don't make explicit reaction videos to like tenured fucking professors who are speaking specifically in a very neutral manner on their own area of expertise, while presenting myself as the actual arbiter of historical truth, of like history as a field of study. As if my reaction videos could be peer-reviewed by my team of academics, which I apparently have. So yeah, let's check this out. Let's see what he's got to say.
The modus operandi.
The modus operandi. Oh my god.
Hey.
The self-dick sucking, I cannot get over it.
Oh my gosh. Holy mother Russia. Hey, noble ones, welcome back to my channel.
Okay,
this is a
it's a stream. It's even a stream. It's a stream clip as well. I mean, nothing wrong with uploading a stream clip, but that just, you know, I'm explicit about the fact that my stream clips, which this is, by the way, are garbage and no one should ever watch them. But if you're watching them, please keep watching so that more ads can play. It's even a stream clip. I thought it was like an actual pre-recorded reaction video, but no, it's a stream clip. Even more reason to just offhandedly discount it.
Alexandra, how the heck do you read her name? Pomieko, never a title, was more appropriate. Historian answers.
I'm not clear if Pomieko is a Russian or a Ukrainian name. I figured it was Russian, but maybe it's Ukrainian because she writes a lot about Ukraine. So who knows?
Google's most popular questions about the Soviet Union. Woohoo! Get ready, let's go. Come on.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Pomieczko. I am a lecturer in modern history at King's College London, and I am here with History Hit to answer the most Googled questions about the Soviet Union.
Please. Oh.
So the first question is...
Hold on a minute. I see what you did, History Hit. I see it.
Are you ready?
Now, there is something that I need to tell you.
Are you ready for the grand conspiracy?
About this video that I really think you need to know before we begin the actual reaction. If you check the comments, you'll notice that there is something fishy. Some comments are extremely negative. History Hit is garbage for pudding.
Okay, I'm going to spoil this for you just to make this faster. So his complaint here is that initially in the video, the first question that they asked the historian was the Soviet Union evil? And she gave an answer that was basically like, it was like any other country or something like that. And His complaint is specifically that she refused to say the Soviet Union was evil. Which, where do you get the idea that that's a good idea to ask a historian in the first place, right? That's not the sort of question that you should ask a historian. It's one that makes no sense at all. At least any historian, like, worth a single shit, when engaging in, like, as a historian like this rather than as a polemicist, is going to be, like, kind of guarded with making, like, value judgments like that. It's just not something that they do. This guy is angry. One, that she did not say that it was evil. Two, that she said that it was not any more evil than, say, the USA, which he really likes the USA, so he's especially angry about that. And three, this channel, which obviously she doesn't work for, is not connected to her, deleted that question when a bunch of dumbfuck commenters got angry at her for not saying the Soviet Union was evil. They deleted that part of the video. And it's like, okay, and? It's a YouTube channel that just they pay people to make these Q&A videos with them in, like, this format that I believe was pioneered by some other, like, YouTube channel to make money off them. And he takes it as, like, they're trying to hide this incredible scandal or something. No, for one, it was a dumb question to ask in the first place. For two, the negative reaction from dumb Americans does not, prove a point either way. For free, the fact that they deleted it, obviously they're going to delete it. They're a channel that's just interested in making money and they don't want to cause controversy or whatever. For four, this says nothing about the professor herself because her answer was totally fine. If you're a history professor and you refuse to make a value judgment on, like, was this country that you study for a living evil? You should laugh at that question. It's an absurd question to ask a historian in the first place. It should have never been asked. But he's angry about it and he treats it like some grand conspiracy. Basically, that is a fair assessment of what he says about this here. So I'm going to skip that part rather than bore you with it. Okay, so now we will skip that and go to him responding to her answering another question.
With her, it's very long, it's an hour long, and it's called Dr. Alexandra Pomieczko, Bandits and Outlaws in the Polish-Soviet Borderlands 1918-1925, and it's on the channel Center for Ukrainian-Canadian Studies. The comments have been turned off completely. Now that you
so
have
I just want to respond to that. She did indeed write a book about so-called bandits, which were usually like groups taking advantage of instability caused by the fall of the Russian Empire in Poland, in Galicia, which was at the time a contested territory between Ukraine and Poland. So that's why I thought that she's probably Ukrainian, especially the Center for Ukrainian Canadian Studies is certainly not an entity that is sympathetic towards the Soviet Union. Though I think he's trying to imply that it is. There is absolutely nothing about any Ukrainian-centric institution in Canada that is pro-Soviet Union. Very, 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 very much so. Anyone who knows the history of the Ukrainians in Canada can attest to that. So he's like trying to frame this woman as like someone with communist sympathies, rather than what she is, a historian. So this institute, which she made that video for, you can clearly see it is dedicated to, according to them, creating, preserving, communicating knowledge and scholarship as it relates to Canada and Ukraine's unique historical relationship, which means, look, I'm not going to beat around the bush here for this guy's dumb fans. Most of the people who came to Canada post-World War II and who were involved in creating initiatives like this were very much fascist, were very much far-right. You know, that denouncing the Russian invasion of Ukraine, stuff like that. You cannot say that this is like some sort of organization that is sympathetic to the Soviet Union or anything. If anything, it's the opposite. And presenting her as like some sort of communist propagandist when she's made content for this institution before and she has worked for them before is frankly absurd. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Context, you know why. I'm a little harsher than you would imagine when I comment this. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so
you're a little harsher than you would imagine because she made a video for the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies. Okay, I don't think you even know what they are then. I don't think you know anything about the context surrounding her and her work and what that institute is.
I see she's already got a little flag with the hammer and sickle. That's very appropriate.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're talking about the USSR.
Stalin would be proud.
The next question, was the Soviet Union communist? This is actually more of a complicated answer than people would think. Ideologues in the Soviet Union would not consider themselves or not consider the state to be communist. Attaining communism was a continual process in the minds of Soviet ideologues. They saw Russia as having began its foundation as a feudal state, then kind of moved up
You will see here, nothing that she's saying here is incorrect. She is talking about what the relevant people at the time who ran this state thought about themselves and their state, how they conceived of, the project they were trying to develop. Absolutely 100% correct, nothing wrong at all. Watch how he reacts to it.
albeit very briefly. Then during its existence, the Soviet Union was imagined as being in a socialist state, right? That's how you have Soviet socialist republics. You don't have, Soviet communist republics. There were a lot of discussions amongst members of the Central Committee about how to continually evolve into this ideal communist state. So from that perspective, you could argue that the Soviet Union was never communist throughout its entire existence. It was constantly building up to that point. That's not to say...
Okay, did you finish? Because I don't want to interrupt.
This is...
Okay, so this is a very easy answer. Yes, they were communists. So that's what we are doing, is it? All right, so let me comment on this.
So this is someone who is simply not equipped to talk about history as an actual field of study, history as a practice at all. That response alone should make it evident if you have studied history even for like one semester, or even done like a single elective class on historiography in your first fucking year of university. You have someone describing 100% in an uncontestable fashion. This is what these people, the people who ran this state thought about themselves, thought about the state, thought about what they were doing. None of what she said about that was incorrect. That is, the job of the historian, to talk about things like that. And his response is, yes, they were communists, because he understands communists as like a negative term, and he wants to apply the label to them desperately. So he simply cannot abide by seeing a historian say something without making any sort of value judgments, not saying this was good or this was bad or not, simply this is who these people were, this is what they thought about themselves and what they were doing in an abbreviated way that is a perfectly fine answer. And this guy, like the anti-intellectual slop that he is, yes, I called him a slop. No one's ever called anyone a slop before. Usually it's like reserved for like describing content. I am pioneering slop as an insult, okay? That wasn't a mistake. Anyway, so he sees that and he just simply cannot abide by it. He's just like, why didn't she just say, yes, they were communists, and then move on? That's not really her job, is it? And for two, they were communists. The people were communists. They would have told you they were communists. But the question wasn't about, like, were the Soviet politicians ideological communists, which they were, or at least they believed of themselves to be. The question was the Soviet Union itself communist? And according to the perspective of those people, of, the state itself, it was run by communists and working towards what they believe to be communism. There's nothing wrong with what she said. So, yeah. But he understands communist as like this negative insult. So he just gets angry that she won't like brand them immediately with what he understands to be a negative term. And it is frustrating to watch. It's frustrating that this is apparently what some people are being exposed to as apparently objective history. Like, this guy considers himself to be like above the person who's responding to here, to be revealing the truth or whatever, to be better at, their study of history than she is. And this is what it is.
Appears to me is something that academics tend to do when they have an agenda. I still don't know if she has an agenda. I'm just saying what it appears to be, because it's what is called a manipulation. Really using semantics.
It's what is called a manipulation. Like, you just use that word like it's a technical term or something. It's a normal word. You don't have to, what is called a manipulation? You're throwing it out like you think it's a big word. Okay, dude. Okay.
She's saying, well, they had this idea of communism as it would have functioned or should function, and because they didn't actually attain that exactly, then we can't really say that they were 100%.
No, she didn't say, we can't really say. She's doing her job as a historian to tell you what these people thought about themselves, how they conceived of themselves. It's not her job to like define communism and then make a value judgment on whether this or that thing is communist or not. And what would the point of that even be? I don't think historians do that at all for communism. They do for other things. But for communism, no one really cares. That's more the purview of like 12-year-olds on Twitter and like Trotskyists writing blogs. Historians do not care about whether something was communist or not. So no, that's not what she's doing at all. This is what you've seen like 12-year-olds do on Twitter. And you are like ascribing that to her now because your only exposure to history is that sort of thing, like arguments on Twitter.
Communists. No, they were communists. Because if that were the case, then we could apply the same concept to the fascists. Benito Mussolini's idea of basing his fascist state and regime upon the recreation of the ancient Roman Empire was never attained how he wanted. It didn't even get close. And we then use the same and apply the same logic to say, well, then where they
fascism? No, fascism is not okay. I would think someone responding to something about the Soviet Union with 900k subscribers who does nothing but make videos complaining about leftists could understand the basics of Marxism. Fascism as an ideology does not and has never conceived of itself as something that has stages. Communism, in the Marxist sense, always has. Communism is seen as like a continual historical process, something that is worked towards or even something that in some cases is believed to eventually sort of happen automatically. So, you can't compare the two. What she's saying there is, here is how a bunch of Marxists conceived of their Marxist project along the terms that Marxists did. You can't say that about fascism because fascists don't believe that same sort of thing about themselves. There's a difference between this is a state that is run by a communist versus this is a state that, according to these people, was communist or not. Like, if you look at Italy today, for example, Giorgia Meloni is a fascist. Unequivocally, this guy will argue with that, of course. He'll get angry about that. He's going to, shit his pants over it probably. She's a fascist. Everyone knows that. Anyone with half a brain knows that, all of her fans are people who are themselves fascists, but they're just too pussy to say it. Everyone else conceives them as fascists. However, is the state of Italy a fascist state? No, it's not. At least not yet. Would she like it to be? Sure. But it's not a fascist state yet. Was Benito Mussolini's Italy a fascist state? Yes. Clearly it was. So you can make that sort of comparison, which makes a lot more sense to the one that he is saying. There's a difference between the ideology of these people is communism and they have achieved communism, which itself is a value judgment, which is why she didn't make a value judgment herself. She talked about how these people conceive of themselves and what their own standards were, which is the job of the historian. It's not to tell you what is good and bad. It is to present you with the facts as close to them as they can reasonably get. And, with their own theses and arguments about how and why these things were, stuff like that. And it's not to tell you whether something is good or bad. It's not to apply a subjective, abstract label of good or bad to things for you. This guy doesn't understand that because he's very dumb and he's simply not qualified to be talking about the things that he's speaking on. And I say that not for the Soviet Union. I say that for history in general, he should not be talking about, especially not in an academic fashion like this, where he puts himself above an academic.
Fascist? Not exactly. You could do the same with the Third Reich, where they really, it's just...
You couldn't. I already explained why you couldn't.
Semantics. They were communist.
And especially because she's not making an argument from her own perspective here. She's telling you how the people, these historical figures, these historical institutions, this historical state, how they thought about themselves and what they were doing, what their official line was. Oh my God, it's just so painful to watch.
By any stretch of definition. Of course they were communists. And just because they didn't attain the most utopic version of communism, which in my opinion, in its complete theoretical frame is unattainable anyways, doesn't mean that they weren't communist in the way we mean that word.
Who's we? Who's we? Because when you use the word communist, you mean like the boogeyman, basically. Not everyone uses the word communist basically as a synonym for bad as you do. So perhaps that's where the disconnect is. You just see someone using this word at all in any capacity and you immediately get angry.
Disagreement with the doctor, professor, archbishop here.
That's not to say that people didn't refer to the Soviet Union as communist. In particular, in the West, referring to the Soviet Union as communist was done in a very sort of derogatory way.
So
he's angry here because she just described him.
Now she's blaming it to Western propaganda.
She's not blaming it on Western propaganda. Here is what's happening here. Here is how these people, this state, these institutions saw themselves and what they were doing. Here is how their opponents saw them and what they were doing. You see that and you just start grunting like a caveman in anger. You see someone describing history, describing facts about history, and your immediate reaction is, oh, so this is this Weasley argument, this goddamn infiltrated communist is making. This infiltrated communist who explicitly is an employee of very much anti-communist institutions. Basically, every good historian who I know in the Soviet Union is absolutely not a communist. This lady especially not. They're all like liberals and conservatives. This is like this brand of like if you wrote a history book for this guy and his audience, you would need to write it like this. In browser, notepad. This is how you would need to write it to be up to his standards. Let's say you were writing a book about the Nazis. I can't type because I don't have an S key. So instead of S, I'm going to put a Z because my S key is broken on this keyboard. The Nazis believe that they were working towards a utopian Aryan state with Zs, and that they needed to eliminate Jews and Bolsheviks to achieve it. Now, someone like this would see that and be like, oh my God, this author is a Nazi. He believes Nazism. So to write for someone like this, you would need to put in brackets after every single statement you make, and this was bad. I do not agree with it. This is like how you would write a history book for him. After every single factual, objectively correct statement that you make, you would need a disclaimer applying the negative adjectives that he wants you to apply to it and explicitly stating that you do not agree with it. And then he would be happy, perhaps. And this is how most people do history on YouTube. It's not just this guy. I just saw it and I thought it was a great example of it. Like, once you've seen one of his arguments, you've seen all of them. The whole video is just this. The whole video is just, why don't you apply this negative value judgment as I want you to this thing that I think is politically bad or whatever. The whole video is like this. So I don't want to watch all 35 more minutes of it. But the whole thing is like, this historian is a secret ideological communist who, by making simple factual statements about the USSR, very basic factual statements that no one else in her field, liberal, communist, conservative, would ever really disagree with. And he just gets angry at them all the time. Like, this guy would get mad at Stephen Kotkin in one of these. Kotkin, who is like famously a far-right, like neocon conservative, he would get angry at him even, just because he would refuse to like fall into the same, to this sort of idiotic good, bad, evil sort of dichotomy that he wants him to. It really doesn't get any better than that, trust me. But we'll watch
Why we call them communists? Because the West was using it in a derogatory way. No, that sounds like your own propaganda, Professor, so I object.
Her own propaganda.
And I
What the fuck are you even talking about, dude?
object very much. Stalin was a communist. Lenin was a communist.
Lenin. Okay, so Lenin and Stalin absolutely would have told you they were a communist. That's not what the question was, though. The question was the USSR, the state, communist? That's a different question. And as I said, Marxism believes that there are stages to socialism, communism, etc. So both of them would have told you they were communist, but they might not have told you that the Soviet Union was a communist state. It's an objectively true statement.
To create a stark difference between, quote-unquote, the capitalist, kind of more open-minded, market-driven Western states versus the more backward, quote-unquote, communist state that was the Soviet Union. So the next question is, was the Soviet Union...
What I find weird there is that she said she's describing what the Americans or the West believed, what they said about the Soviet Union, and they described it as a backward state. That's clearly not her opinion either, just like what she was saying earlier about how the Soviets conceived of themselves. But he didn't take issue with her saying that because it agrees with him. I think he just legitimately does not register that she's not talking about herself here. She's describing how people in the past thought about themselves and how people in the past judge others. Let's watch one more question. Was the Soviet Union a democracy? He'll get really angry about this one.
A democracy.
Nope.
The Soviet Union, for the majority of its existence, operated as a one-party state.
Yep.
So in that sense, no. But sometimes people think of the Soviet Union as functioning as a democracy because of this idea of democratic centralism that was really at the heart of the Communist Party.
Oh, that's insane. Is she trying to...
That you laugh at, like, she's describing what the people in this state thought they were doing, how they conceived of themselves. And she explicitly started by saying, like, by the definition that people like you have, no, because it was a one-party state. And then she goes on to say, but this is, this is how they saw themselves. This is this concept under which they organized themselves, that they believed in, and that they believed that they were applying. Objectively true. And his reaction to that is just to scoff and say, how could you ever say that? How could you ever argue that? Do you know what is even happening before you? This is insane. This is the problem with YouTube history, is that even if you're really trying to do history as it should be done, your audience is going to be people like this and people who are even dumber than this, who are just going to hear you make an objective historical statement, immediately shut off the video and leave an angry comment because it didn't agree with their own like personal politics and the negative adjectives that they need you to say. It honestly hurts. It's pure anti-intellectualism. Like, of the most debased right-wing kind. It is simply someone who does not understand what is happening before them in the slightest, yet who seems to believe that they really do. Hence the earlier statement about peer review. He sees like an eminent expert in their field. He doesn't even conceive of the possibility that this person might know more about this than him, that they might have a better framework for understanding this than him, and that he might have something to learn from her. He comes into it immediately with this idea that he is the one who has he's the arbiter of the truth, as a guy who apparently made videos where he dressed up in armor and like LARPed, and also complains about like black people and women in Netflix series occasionally. He thinks that he is the arbiter of truth here, and he is the one to fact check her. And as he has demonstrated, he very much is not. He doesn't even understand the basic concepts of academic study, does not understand how she is speaking on this, even though it's really abundantly clear. He takes everything that she says as a value judgment, and he's just angry that her talking about how people in the past thought of and conceived about things does not conform to his own personal political polemic judgment, which is, this thing is bad, this thing is evil. Like she's saying, this is how the Bolsheviks thought about themselves, this is how they conceived of themselves, this is what they thought they were doing. And he's like, so you're saying that you believe that they were democratic? So you're saying that you believe that they weren't communist? No, she was not saying that. I fucking guarantee you, someone who works for a Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies does not believe any of that. Anyway, that is painful, and I should make a video about YouTube history, because it really is just that. It really is that over and over again, 1,000 million times. That sort of thing. Just people who do not simply know what history actually is, which is a field of study, a method of study. History is something that you do. It's not just narratives about the past. It's not just turning the past into a storybook. And these people do not engage in it in any way that is even remotely acceptable, in any way that can even be remotely called history in that sense. But it's just so painful, because I'm not going to get through to anyone if I make that video, because it's just going to be a bunch of these people's fans coming in and complaining because I said a bad thing about the streamer who they are obsessed with. And yeah, there's not really much that you can do in that circumstance, so I'd rather not. Like, this guy could watch, like, the most far-right Soviet historian you could find talking about the Soviet Union, and he would still get angry about it. Like, anyone aside from, like, the polemicists who have moved into popular history would make statements very similar to what that professor was saying. Get Kokin in there, he'd say very similar things, and he's, like, the furthest right expert on the Soviet Union that I can think of. It's just so painful. It's so painful. This guy has no fucking clue what he's talking about. Like, the way that he talked about peer review, and the very notion this guy who makes YouTube React videos has like a team of academics to peer review him. Like, that's not what peer review is. And you have a team of academics? You make YouTube React videos. You turn on the camera in your bedroom and you just start fucking blurting it out. You do not have a team of researchers and academics. Fuck off, man. Give me a break.